I want to, it's customary to keep things light and joyful, positive, on Easter Sunday in church. And there never has been a need to do anything differently than that, at least not until now. If I didn't believe this was necessary and an intrinsic part of Christian faith, even resurrection faith, I wouldn't speak this morning about HB 1557, Parental Rights in Education, also known as Don't Say Gay law. It is both required, as it is a matter of grave concern, or at least should be, as is our response to it, since it speaks well or ill of our faith in the resurrected Jesus, of which we will hear more in my morning message. At Governor DeSantis' law signing was the mother of a 13-year-old in Leon County, Florida. The mom was angry at her child's school. January Littlejohn helped galvanize support for the law after saying she was not told about Deer Lake Middle School's gender-affirming plan for her child. Littlejohn spoke and said she learned from her child that the school had asked which bathroom the teen wanted to use. The school's plan, she said, included calling the child by a chosen name at school rather than the one given by Littlejohn, and not informing her of the change. Now, Littlejohn, January, has shared this story repeatedly in the past. In a speech from November 2021, quote, "We were the only people in her lives not affirming this new, shiny, glittery identity that we thought would ultimately lead to her self-harm," Littlejohn said. "It is my job to protect my child, and the school took that away from me." I'm sure this story, if true, can resonate with anyone. A school involved in a child's life in a manner that runs counter to how parents want is generally not good. Agreed. But let's look at the response. The response to one action must balance against the initial act. This is reasonable, and surely governments are obliged to be reasonable. In other words, a remedy must be commensurate or equal to the injury. Now, a remedy commensurate with the Littlejohn story is a parent-teacher meeting or a parent-principal meeting in which this issue could be discussed and worked out, not a law that requires that no school staff in the state of Florida from now on and forever engage a student positively when the issue of sexual orientation or gender identity is raised. This might have worked out at the level at the teacher and principal of parents, but instead something entirely different was chosen. Without question, it is an extreme reaction by the state of Florida to a school calling a child not by the name used at home and asking which bathroom was preferred to pass a law saying, quote, "Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate." It would be almost impossible to think of a harm that would justify making it illegal for teachers and staff to speak of a kindergartner's family, parents, or interact with a middle schooler's quest for identity, if so engaged. To condemn LGBTQ children to a voiceless existence when it comes to themselves or their families by making it illegal for a teacher or staff to respond to or speak of a child's parents is a wrong of such monumental size that it cannot be warranted on any grounds. This law attacks the heart of a child's existence, his, her, or their family. It is so funnily dehumanizing that it should make us gasp and shock at those who enacted it. But here's the truth of the Littlejohn story. Their continuously publicized account of what happened in Leon County is not what happened. Emails obtained show Littlejohn wrote the school in 2020 and notified a teacher that her child wanted to change pronouns, and she would not stop her child from using preferred pronouns or name of choice at school. In an August 27, 2020 email to a teacher, the mom stated in part, "This has been an incredibly difficult situation for our family, and her father and I are trying to be as supportive as we can. She is currently identifying as non-binary. She would like to go by the new name, it's blank, and prefers the pronouns they/them. We have not changed her name at home yet, but I told her if she wants to go to school, wants to go by the name, what it is, with her teachers, I won't stop her." The teacher in the email thanked Littlejohn and asked if she should share with other teachers. Littlejohn explained it was difficult and confusing and went on to write, "Whatever you think is best," or the child can handle it herself. In another email the same day, Littlejohn told the teacher, "This gender situation has thrown us for a loop. I sincerely appreciate your support. I'm going to let her take the lead on this." The story told repeatedly to justify a law that makes it a crime for teachers to speak positively or interact in any way with 5-year-old and older children when the topic of their same-sex parents, for example, is raised, or their own gender identity is a topic open for conversation. The story isn't true. It happened the opposite of what is now being staged. The parents wanted the help of their child's teachers and the school itself. The superintendent, in fact, had a personal meeting with this parent or the parents. They engaged in a parent-teacher meeting and a parent-superintendent meeting, just as should have been done before certain politicians got involved to create the Parental Act Rights in Education law. This law, vicious in that it's perpetrated against 5-year-old and older children, violent in that it repudiates them and their families at the core expression of their humanity, that of being given the right to speak of one's parents, family, and self, an egregious and flagrant abuse of power in that it's supposedly validated by means of a bold-faced lie, a story that, in fact, in truth, is an example of the reasonable and balanced process one would expect public schools and parents to take. This law is, on top of all this, somehow entirely unnecessary. Because as, quote, because as Andrew Spar, president of the Florida Education Association Union said, elementary schools, especially in kindergarten through 3rd grade, do not teach about these subjects and have state curriculum standards guiding classroom lessons. The harm for which this heinous remedy is deemed justified never existed. For those who say nothing in the law says anything against gay people or the LGBTQ community specifically, I'm not going to quote from Florida lawmakers who publicly stated that it was precisely meant in such terms. Rather, the truth is much more obvious, since we all know it's impossible not to discuss the sexual orientation and gender identities of heterosexuals, such as moms and dads, and gender identities, male and female, in classrooms from kindergarten on up. What, are we going to show genderless moms and dads no cultural clues and cues? How? How is a child supposed to know who we're talking about? Are families in picture books and learning to read books somehow not going to show parents as male and female? They can also show them as being male and male or female and female, but that's now illegal. Someone must be shown. So guess who will be and who's now illegal to be? Do you understand that it's now illegal? It is a crime to talk about or show same-sex parents in elementary school, in public schools. Even when a child brings up the topic, it's a crime. It's breaking the law. Do we get that? As to the issue of whether this law is concerned with parental rights, as on the surface it would seem to be, since the law is entitled Parental Rights in Education, don't be deceived. What is happening elsewhere in state governments provides a clear answer. Early this month, Idaho's State House approved HB 675, which stipulates medical personnel who provide gender-affirming health care and parents who agree for their child to receive such care could face life in prison. The bill passed 55-13 and now moves to the Senate. The Alabama State Senate made it a crime to provide gender reassignment medical services to transgender youth last month, while at the same time, the Alabama legislature is passing their own version of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill or law, asserting somehow with a straight face, again at the same time, that parental rights are at the heart of their public policy. The Texas governor in late February also instructed Child Protective Services to open child abuse investigations into parents who provide gender-affirming care to their transgender children. Parental rights that silence LGBTQ children, withdraw public support, and attempt to erase their existence as families are approved. Parental rights that support transgender children and youth are, in the case of medical care, criminalized. If after all this, someone is still thinking, yeah, but how seriously do we have to take this? Let me share with you a story to show you how extreme this has already become and will only get worse. A gay Ohio teacher is defending himself after his school district fired him for giving LGBTQ pride bracelets to students. The teacher, Jay Bowman, was working as a substitute in a classroom at Huntington Local High School when several students asked him about a rainbow-colored bracelet he was wearing, according to the Scioto Valley Guardian. The bracelet featured the name First Capital Pride, an LGBTQ advocacy group. Bowen then took off his bracelet and gave it to a student. He explained to the students that First Capital Pride offers support groups for teens who may be struggling, are suicidal, are ostracized, and need support. Bowman said, per the Scioto Valley Guardian, that the gesture violated school policy according to a superintendent. This is over a bracelet. Over a bracelet. Students asking questions and the teacher not even starting a conversation. By the way, Ohio is now putting together its version of our Florida's law. Doesn't even have it yet. In an ABC Ipsos poll from March, just 37% of Americans said they would support legislation that would prohibit classroom lessons about sexual orientation or gender identity in elementary school. I want to finish quoting from an article. Gay rights advocates sued Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to block a new law that forbids classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade. The challenge filed in federal court in Tallahassee on behalf of Equality Florida and Family Equality alleges that the law violates the constitutionally protected rights of free speech, equal protection, and due process of students and families. Quote, this effort to control young minds through state censorship and to demean LGBTQ lives by denying their reality is a grave abuse of power, the lawsuit says. The United States Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed that LGBTQ people and their families are at home in our constitutional order. The state of Florida has no right to declare them outcasts or to treat their allies as outlaws by punishing schools where someone dares to affirm their identity and dignity. More fundamentally than being at home in our constitutional order, at Church on the Hill, we recognize that LGBTQ people and their families are home in God's creational order and in this body of Christ. The parental rights and education law is a grotesque abuse of the most fundamental human right of children and families to name one another, to be recognized as a family, to be seen and heard as belonging to parents and parents to children, and to be oneself It stands in our midst as a new monument to legalized inhumanity, whose shadow falls over us all, a darkness against which lights must be raised to disperse it from our land and law, or it will grow larger, as such monstrosities do, as is being planned, I dare say. I ask you to comprehend the times we are now in. There are times when things are no longer as they once were. We see this in Ukraine, terribly so. In such times as we live in presently, to live in the light of God, who claims all as the Lord's own, requires us to respond to what is happening to us and others in our state and to our nation. God bless us, our church, our state, our nation, and our world, making way for peace, justice, respect, and equality to rise and embrace all humanity.
Amen. Amen.